No sendings off, no terrible back passes, no goalkeeping disasters, just Celtic ripping them apart, shredding them because of the sheer pace and skill of these guys.
This is the biggest game of both Rangers' lifetimes.
It's the antidote to the insecurity you've felt since going bust. Is this world's most successful club thing you've been throwing around
They've
for the
been
last several years?
self-identifying.
Yeah. So,
Smashing Aberdeen's not for everyone, is it? I'm joined by these couple of rock stars, Martin Melly.
Yes.
And Stephen.
how's it going?
Not too bad. That was a very enjoyable game of football, Martin Melly.
It sure was. As you say, not for everyone, but Celtic went out there. We were a bit worried about the game. No need to be. No need to be. Celtic dished up one of the best performances of the season, just absolutely ruthless. And to be honest, I don't think Aberdeen were that bad, but that doesn't matter.
It's cause for concern though. I'm a bit worried about it because as we found out going into the game against Borussia Dortmund, 6-0 is the most dangerous lead to take into a Champions League game.
I think we can agree. Like, we can just bin everything where you go, oh well, now the preparation for that game leading us into the Champions League. Does this mean X? It means absolutely nothing.
No.
It's two completely different concepts of football that we're playing in these competitions, and it was two different concepts of football that Brendan Rodgers served up to Jimmy Tilleen, because I think, Melly, Brendan Rodgers fancied that as a bit of a statement after the game, maybe saying things like, you know, Aberdeen, they had a midweek game or didn't have a midweek game. Everyone's talking about how good Aberdeen were. People forget how good we've been. And I think Brendan Rodgers was very animated on the touchline as well. And it's funny because I know, a wee bit too animated. But he just, I think he wanted to prove a point. He wanted to prove a point to Aberdeen. He wanted to prove a point to Jimmy Tilleen. And he wanted to prove a point to Rangers. He wanted to prove a point to anyone watching that, like, Aberdeen, they might be good, but they're not the Brodge.
It feels like he took that personally, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It was like Michael Jordan.
Yes, yeah.
It feels like he took it personally that Aberdeen came to Celtic Park and went away with all the plaudits as if Aberdeen were the team that should have won the game. And he went, hold on a wee minute, and served up an absolute ruthless display from Celtic where, as I said, I don't think Aberdeen were too bad, but it kind of felt like the Dortmund game, but opposite, where everything Celtic touched turned to a goal. They were absolutely clinical in everything they done, and the free forwards in it, the speed of play, anytime Aberdeen made a mistake, Celtic pounced on it. It was ruthless, but it was absolutely brilliant to watch. It was thoroughly enjoyable.
He has seemed genuinely irked by all this stuff, all this coverage of Aberdeen, and not just that Aberdeen have been getting a lot of plaudits, which they deserve, because no domestic teams don't really do this. They don't go on winning streaks or undefeated streaks like this. So Aberdeen do deserve credit, but Brendan Rodgers has been very keen with every available opportunity to remind everyone that he thinks Celtic should have won that game at Celtic Park. He still believes that. He said that in the press both after that game and in the build-up to this semi-final. Look, Aberdeen do deserve credit, but we should have won that game. So that's something I'm not particularly happy about. Specifically, what I was very impressed with from Celtic on the day was that they managed to close off all the things that Aberdeen were good at Celtic Park. Now, when Aberdeen won that second half to get the 2-2 draw, coming back from 2-0 down, what they were quite good at was getting out of their defensive third in a way that we don't generally see in domestic football. So we see teams going long, we see teams sitting back with 11 men or 10 men behind the ball with maybe one hanging about the halfway line, and the tactic generally is just launch it into one of the corner flags and one of their strikers will try and chase it or something. But they were quite adept at playing through that. They were quite effective on the break. Celtic shut all of that down. They couldn't move. There was several times where any breakaways that they tried to get at Hampden were completely snuffed out immediately. Cameron Carter-Vickers plays a big role in that. I think he's the main difference you could look at in the lineup from one game to the next. I think he's very good at stepping in as almost like another defensive midfielder at times, such as the positions he takes up. But I was really impressed with the adjustment that Celtic clearly had made from one game to the next. They thought, right, we'll see all the plaudits they're getting for being able to hit on the break. Let's just close that down altogether.
The midfield seem to be playing a wee bit further forward as well, just closing the space up against that Aberdeen, and just, as Stephen says, we were just cleaning up everything at the back. I was wondering what Brendan has to do to get any credit in this league, because he must rightly feel irked. When he first came last season after Ange took over and it wasn't really clicking and we were all having a go of him here, he got the criticism and he took the criticism on, and he obviously reacted to that by getting angry, and in the press he was getting a bit snippy and all that. Then the team started to do well, but no one swapped that criticism for plaudits. And then he starts off this season brilliantly.
Yep.
and there's no plaudits, and then you draw with Aberdeen, and Aberdeen get all, as you say, all the praise coming off the back of that game. Then we beat Aberdeen handsomely, absolutely smash them. And from some quarters of the media, the first thing that comes out is, well, that's what happens when you've got a much bigger budget. And I know, and I was tearing my hair out because
same
people, people were making the same comment. People were making the comment that when Celtic got beaten by Dortmund, they were complaining about budgets. No, we weren't. Nobody within Celtic where it was. We weren't really complaining about budgets. It seems with every goal, I think you said this in the Discord, Stephen, it seems with every goal Celtic score in a game, they get less credit. And after a 6-0 win, for guys in the press to come out and go, well, that's what happens when you've got budgets. You saw what happened against Celtic at Dortmund. I just want to make clear for everybody, the difference is, it's not even the same ballpark. It's between Celtic and Dortmund and Aberdeen and Celtic. It's not the same ballpark. The average price Celtic played for a starting 11 player against Aberdeen was £3.5 million, and that includes the massive outlier of ENGELS. The average cost of an Aberdeen player was about £5.5. It was about £500,000. So Celtic are on average paying £3 million more per player for Aberdeen. Dortmund were paying on average £35 million per player more than Celtic. It's a completely different galaxy. So it's not just a case of Celtic roll up and automatically win because they've got this budget that dwarfs Aberdeen. That's just not the case. And then secondly, for the record, someone needs to point out to me what a standard win against Aberdeen is. Because if it's 1-0, nobody talks about budgets. 2-0, you don't really hear about budgets. 3-0, you don't hear about budgets. The minute it's 6-0, all of a sudden it's down to budgets. So it doesn't make any sense to me. And I think people need to be very careful, Stephen, when they're talking about budgets, because very quickly the press and pundits, what they're going to do is just turn this whole league into an Excel spreadsheet of balance sheets. And if you're going to compare Celtic's budget, then see the next time Aberdeen or Hearts or Hibs get put out of Europe by an absolute minnow, or the next time they get put out of the League Cup or the Scottish Cup by someone in the first or second division, you need to start the budget chat then.
Well, it's an incredibly boring way just to look at football in general.
I thought I made it quite exciting.
You tried your very best.
Nobody's going to do any better than that.
No. And see if the media, or see if the football consuming public in this country want to have a genuine conversation about how the wealth in football needs redistributed from the very top down. And in some ways, even the existence of the Champions League has rendered a lot of European leagues virtually pointless, because it's the same teams that win it all the time, even at the top end. The reason the top 5 leagues stand out above all others is for a number of reasons, but one among them is that it seems like a number of teams can win that league, but it's always the same teams anyway, that generally, there might be one outlier. Occasionally Liverpool might win it, Bayer Leverkusen might win it, but usually it's the same teams that win it. And that's the Champions League is only making that worse, because there's a huge injection for one team at the top, whether it's Scotland, Croatia, any of these smaller countries, and that makes them basically unable to compete with. If anyone wants to have that genuine conversation that deserves to happen, then by all means, but it's not about that, is it? No. It's simply, this chat only ever comes out to diminish Celtic's achievements in domestic football, and it's so transparent, because Rangers beat Ross County 6-0 a few weeks ago. There was no chat about budgets there, and not even an acknowledgement that it has come out a little bit recently when the chat about Rangers, the mess of their books at the moment, that was a huge story. But no one ever talks about how they pay the most to players to win football games in the entire country, and yet they can't manage it. That is a bigger squandering of resources than anything we see anywhere else in this country. But the reason the media don't focus on that is because it's far easier to get the public whipped up into a frenzy when you put big gold pound signs and say the war chest and all that. When anyone who's even on nod in terms of how these things work knows that a salary output is by far a better indicator of the quality of a team than just random arbitrary transfer fees. That's generally the standard. The more you pay in salary, the better your team should be. That doesn't mean you can't massively waste the money, which is clearly what Rangers are doing, because they're paying the formerly English-based players fortunes to be at their club, but they're wasting far more money than anyone else.
Also, it's a very, very sort of murky subject when you get into it, because if Celtic wanted to sign, say for instance, Sokler, his agent wouldn't walk in and go, right, I want 800 quid a week for the guy, because he knows he's at Celtic, so he's going to pay more for him anyway than he would be getting paid at Aberdeen. So it's a complete mess, but it's a word of warning to the sort of press out there and some pundits for other areas that I saw, like, if you're just going to reduce the league to, they've got more money than us, so there's no point discussing the game, there's no point analysing our failings, there's no point talking any more about this result. Also, it's worth pointing out, how did Celtic get all this money? We fans turn up every week. They sell season tickets to us. They build a big stadium. They use that money to improve the team. We get into the Champions League. We use that money to improve the team. No one gave us this money. We didn't trip over a pot of gold somewhere.
No, it's a fashionable conversation to have in football because everyone looks at clubs like Man City, PSG, all the state-run clubs and sort of try and lump Celtic in with that because they've got more money than anyone else in Scotland, but it's simply not applicable at all. It's a completely different scenario because Celtic's wealth is generally pretty organically grown by having a large fan base that loyally pay every single year and buy merch and buy season tickets. That's where the money comes from. It's not some dodgy like Saudi deal or massive TV. Lord knows it's not a TV deal that pays for this for Celtic.
Thanks, Neil Doncaster.
Yeah, so it's misleading completely, and I think, as I say, it only ever comes out to diminish Celtic's achievements in it. No one's having real conversations about it. It's just, Celtic won again, it must be money.
It's so lazy. We do have lots of money, Melly. Some of that we have spent on new players. One of them was AUSTON TRUSTY, who played in against Cameron and Carter Vickers. We were talking about this recently on another podcast. We were saying that actually might have been me and you in the post-match podcast for the Dundee. It's like logically, if you come in fresh and you've got no history of Celtic centre halves, and you're looking at the two of them playing, you're thinking to yourself, well, Cameron Carter Vickers and AUSTON TRUSTY are probably my first two picks, but you can't just delete everything Liam Scales has done in a Celtic shirt and see him drop. So it's a bit of a difficult choice that Brendan's got.
It's difficult, but it's a good choice to have, isn't it? Because, again, when we think back to this time last year, we were scraping around with Liam Scales. Nat Phillips was playing around this time, wasn't he?
He'll go down as one of the most forgotten Celtic. He'll honestly be one of the most forgotten Celtic players ever.
Yep, and so that was what we were working with. I think it was around this time we sort of lost to Kilmarnock, didn't we, in Rugby Park, and he scored an OG. So from where we've came to where we are now, it's night and day, but if you're looking at it, Brendan Rodgers mentioned this on, I think it was in his press conference on Friday. He said there's no time for sentiment. It's about putting out the best team, the team that he thinks can win. And look, I've not been a fan of Scales in the past, but he has changed my mind. Doesn't mean to say now that we can... you need to be ruthless with this sort of thing. Celtic are going out there to get into cup finals. Celtic are going into Europe at these games. And Brendan Rodgers mentioned it in the post-match. I think it was Charlie Mulgrew asked him about it, about Trusty. He said he loves Scales, but Trusty was put in and asked him about the aspect of Trusty being faster than Scales. And Brendan Rodgers said, yeah, that was kind of my thinking because of the goal we conceded at Celtic Park. But I just think Trusty's a better player, and that doesn't mean to say Scales is a bad player, but he's been brought in, he's came from a sort of higher pedigree, we've paid a lot of money for him, and it's going to be him or Scales because they're both left-footed, and I think he is faster than him, I think he is stronger, and I think he's a better passer than him. So seeing all those things, I think when you've seen that partnership really starting to come to fruition over the last week, I think we could see a decent partnership. That's not to say if Liam Scales comes in, I'm going to be ever worried about it. I think he's been decent, but I think Trusty and Carter Vickers long term will be what Brendan Rodgers wants, and I think it's got a good blend in there because Carter Vickers is brilliant, as we know, and Trusty can sort of complement that. But what I like about Trusty is when he was playing on the right side, a lot of the time he would pass it from right centre half to left back, missing out that centre half, getting it into midfield. So Liam Scales, as we know, passing wasn't his main thing, and he'd maybe take the easy option a lot of time and be slow on it. Trusty's, he's not the best passer, but he's quite quick with his passing. Yeah. So I think that's what will do it for him as well, along with the pace aspect.
First thing you say really about this Scales versus Trusty thing is that Scales will play. I mean, what we know about Cameron Carter Vickers, even this season, even in the last few weeks, as he gets injured, he just does. That's something that will have to be managed. And the good thing about it is that it won't be terrifying if we go without Cameron Carter Vickers. Don't get me wrong, it's not ideal to go into any fixture without Cameron Carter Vickers. He's one of our best players. And apart from, did you see that time against Aberdeen where he accidentally took a free kick?
No.
Pretty funny. It was kind of, Celtic had a free kick and he went to take it, and he went to take it but tried to pull out, but he played it anyway and had to get somebody else to come over and touch it. Idiot. All said he was terrible. But no, he's a brilliant defender, but we're without him quite a lot. So Scales can come in and play alongside Trusty. And the good thing about this situation is that what I said at the time when Trusty signed, I hadn't seen him kick a single ball. But you look at that, you look at the profile coming from a decent level and a decent outlay, and really everything you're looking for in the physical profile and of a footballer coming to right age, everything that coming to sell. You look at that and you think, right, okay, he is a guy who's come in to at least compete with Scales. What I said at the time and what I thought at the time was that even if it takes him a long time, if he's to be eventually the guy I get next to Cameron Carter-Vickers, even if it takes weeks to happen, what will happen is that he will take that place or not through merit. He will display something that means he is undroppable or he deserves that place in the team. And that's kind of how it's borne out. It's not been...
Do you think that's it? Do you think it's that? You think that's it going forward, really?
Maybe.
Both being fit, Carter-Vickers fit and Trusty fit, do you think that's it?
For the most part, yes, now. And I think it is because, look, Scales hasn't done anything wrong. And I heard Pat Bonner saying that after the game. He said, look, it's really harsh on Scales because he's done nothing wrong. I agree with that. But sometimes, and this is exactly what we look for, we don't look for players to do something so bad that they need taken out of the team. It's just we've brought in someone who
strengthen the competition.
Yes, strengthen the competition and who can maybe do the odd thing to quicken Celtic up that fraction of a second that we need to be, whether he's faster, stronger, a better passer, whether he's a combination of all of those things better than Liam Scales. It doesn't mean Liam Scales has done something wrong to lose his place. It simply means that Celtic have done the right thing and brought in a player that has basically played himself into the team and is very difficult to shake out. That's what Scales did in the first place. That's how he got he took his chance.
That's how we're not talking about Nat Phillips anymore.
He took his chance and kept the position was entirely his own for a year. What we needed was someone else in that position, because don't talk to me about Stephen Welsh and Mike Nawrocki and all these guys. We needed another option. Whether that was Trusty or whether Scales is now the backup option doesn't really matter to me. What matters is that someone has taken that place for now on merit. That's the important thing.
When you look at the sort of revolution of this team with bringing in Carter-Vickers, bringing in Kasper Schmeichel, Baye and Trusty, the defence has changed a lot, even from the end point of last season where we had that settled back four and Joe Hart, but we can see Celtic doing things better now, and what we've seen that with Kasper Schmeichel, Celtic are able to get it from their goalkeeper out to their left back or into midfield straight away. Trusty can play it into a left back rather than holding on to it too much. This team is moving forward. It doesn't mean Joe Hart was a bad player. It doesn't mean that Liam Scales is a bad player. It doesn't mean Greg Taylor's a bad player or the latter two aren't going to play again. It just means this team is evolving, and instead of doing what Celtic have always done and selling a player, then not replacing them properly, what we're doing is we're bringing in replacements for guys we've already got who are already good players. And when you look around, that starting lineup's probably the strongest starting lineup I could pick the now. On the bench, we've got a couple of options in Ida, in Scales, in Taylor, Bernardo, McCowan, if he was available on the bench. There's options there, and we're looking at this team going, right, where can we improve on this? Whereas before, like this time last season, we were talking about we need about 6 or 7 players after we'd bought 5 or 6 in the summer last season. So the work that we've done in last summer's transfer window is slowly being undone, and this is where we want to be. And you're looking at the team going, right, who's the next big sellable asset? It might not be this January or next summer, so we might be able to keep this team together and purposely improve on it, and that's what we've done with Trusty. That's what we've done with Baye, probably Kasper Schmeichel.
It's the team it's evolution of the team, isn't it? It's not revolution. We want
evolution. That was the word.
We want the team to evolve, Stephen. We don't want the team to revolve.
No.
We don't want the team to evolve. There's a couple of players that are playing the best football of their career. I'd be quite happy to say they're playing the best football of their career, and they're playing it at Celtic this season. Kuhn, who we've spoken about at length. DAIZEN MAEDA, who we will speak about at length shortly, and AJ, who's absolutely unbelievable. But before we do, if you're watching this or listening to this and you're thinking, why are those guys not talking about the in-depths of the game and how the goals were scored and what happened on the day and crosses and passes and all that good stuff from the actual games itself, patreon.com/20minutetims is where you can get the At The Match podcast, amongst other podcasts, videos and writing. Every single Celtic match, we have a podcast after it, patreon.com/20minutetims, and it costs about £3.50 per month, cheaper than a single match day programme to get involved in that. So the link is everywhere you're watching and listening to this. Stephen.
Where were we? AJ. Right, okay.
He's unbelievable at the moment.
Yeah, he's just getting better and better all the time. And I've been thinking about this when he's been the captain a couple of times recently. He's certainly worn the armband and has grown into that. And if anything, it's really propelled him on to take on more responsibility. And that's really not the case for other clubs you might talk about, right? If other clubs are running around screaming about having no leaders whatsoever, it's the complete opposite with Celtic. To an extent, within reason, you could look at that main Celtic lineup, and if we broadly agree that against Aberdeen is sort of, it's not going to be the lineup because Taylor will play, Bernardo will play, the guys you just listed there. But looking at that lineup, with the exception of Valle, because he's like a young player and he's on loan, you could really put the captaincy on any one of those players and it wouldn't seem completely ridiculous because they all exhibit some sort of leadership capability, I think. And that's a really good position to be in for a club to have that many potential captains. No, like none of them will get it, of course, but you could, and it wouldn't completely look out of normality or anything like that. So Alistair Johnston is the guy who's getting it just now, and it seems to have just kicked his game on to a completely new level. This season, remarkably enough, he is actually our joint top league scorer. Right?
I was just on my phone. I don't know if the camera caught that. I had my phone in my hand because I was anticipating you saying that, and I thought, is that still the case?
He's got 4 league goals, which is the same as Callum McGregor. So two scorers who are very unlikely. And Kyogo, I think, is the other one who's got 4.
To be fair to AJ, none of his goals have been deliberate.
No.
They've all like off his arse, off his thigh, sticking a foot out and it going in the back of the net. It's unbelievable.
With a guy who was previously known, if you were asked me to sum up Alistair Johnston in a sentence or just a couple of words or whatever previously, I would have said like warrior. Like, he's in there, he relishes the fight, he really gets stuck in, and he really embodies that kind of desire to win that we really want in a Celtic fullback.
Do you know who he reminds me of?
Who?
KT.
Well, yeah, I can totally get that. That's an absolute battler in there. But prior to this season, I would have said all those things. Those are all still valid. Those all still apply to how Alistair Johnston goes about his business. But it's the chance creation that is exceptional this season as well as getting 4 goals, which is really unusual for him, and that's the case for quite a few Celtic players. Several Celtic players are very likely to go on and have the best goal-scoring seasons of their entire career if things keep up like this. But he's also top of charts such as big chances created and expected assists. And why that's semi-important if you're interested in that kind of thing is assists are one thing. Assists are very clear. You are the last person to have touched the ball before someone scores. But expected assists and big chances created is a nod towards the player whose chance creation, the level of chances he's creating are very high. It's just that goals aren't coming from them.
Yeah,
so
like if you had Dessers up front.
yeah, well, exactly. It takes 2 to create an assist because you could do all the work, lay it on a plate for someone that can blaze it over the bar and you don't get anything for it. So that's why expected assist and chance created matters for a player like that. He's right up there. He's top of both of those for the league in terms on FOTMA stats. So a very, very impressive season so far, and it's just another born Celtic leader out there. It's been an incredible season from him.
A right back getting goals and assists, and none of them are penalties, eh?
Yeah.
Who'd have thought it?
Yeah.
But AJ's been absolutely sensational this season. Another one that shows like you kind of need to be ruthless. When he came in for AJ, we were maybe in for Juranovic, AJ came in for Juranovic. We're maybe looking at going, Juranovic is maybe a bit better going forward and maybe a bit quicker, but AJ's grown into it. He's a better defender, I'd say. He wasn't as quick, but he is what Brendan Rodgers has wanted, even though he's not a Brendan Rodgers sign, is that powerful running. That run for the last goal that he makes to cross it over, that is a powerful run, and that is what you're looking for. And he's getting in decent crosses, he's getting into great areas, and it's just exactly what you want on that side, and we just need to find that on the other side. I've been happy with Baye, but I don't know how long term that's going to be. So if we could get somebody on the other side like him, and this is the sort of way Celtic have to work it, don't they? Juranovic was a good player, but it came to an age when Celtic could have got the best money for him. They'd done that, and then they brought in AJ, who's younger. And when we had him scouted by Alex from The Athletic, he said, I can't believe Celtic have got this guy. I can't believe I've not heard more about him. And we're starting to see why that is, because he is a sort of complete fullback. He's got a bit of everything, and just look forward to watching him play. And that partnership he's got with Kuhn out there is just working wonders this season.
DAIZEN as well is unbelievable. Took the match ball home against Aberdeen, celebrated all of his goals, which you're allowed to do at Hampden. Did you see Andy Halliday not celebrate his goals? It wasn't even like non-celebration. It wasn't he just didn't run away and go. I thought he went, sorry. I'm sorry. He was like
right in front of them.
It was,
as well.
for those who are not watching on camera, he literally put his hands up in like an "I'm sorry" gesture. Andy, honestly, mate, nobody cares. The Rangers fans barely remember. The only reason people know who Andy Halliday is because he's on a podcast.
He's a celebrity Rangers fan.
Yeah, he's a celebrity
He's barely
Rangers.
even an ex-Rangers player.
He treated the thing like he was like Henri scoring against Arsenal or something. Like, no.
Larson scoring against
Lars,
us.
I wasn't going to grace him with the comparison, but
It's not even just a "I'm sorry" gesture. It's a "look at me" gesture. It's the "sorry guys, look, I'm just being professional here, guys. You know, I'm just doing my bloody job here. But I'm sorry, you came a cropper of that. Yeah, don't know why he's got that accent.
Andy Halliday played for about 1 million football clubs, and none of them. He could walk down the streets of Middlesbrough or Edinburgh or wherever else, Azerbaijan, and they would not one person would recognise him.
That sounds like you've made that up as a joke, by the way. He actually did play in Azerbaijan.
I did Azerbaijan Day Holiday. That's what they used to call him.
It's maybe the worst one since, remember Charlie Adam did it? He scored against Liverpool and no one remembered he'd even played for Liverpool. You're joking.
The point is, right, people only know Andy Halliday, as I'm repeating myself here, they only know he played for Rangers because he does a podcast and he talks about playing for Rangers incessantly on it. But right now we've got a guy he's a pundit, he plays for Motherwell, he's on a podcast, and now he doesn't celebrate goals scoring against Rangers. It's comical, and honestly, man, nobody cares. No, I say that with all due respect, but nobody cares. DAIZEN.
Yeah, another one who's just having
Would you celebrate if you scored against Celtic?
Oh, absolutely get. Especially if they'd sold me. Especially if I'd been pish for them and I'd been abused and they'd sold me. I'd get up them.
Not only with
absolutely.
this, I'd add a Bayor it. That'd be right up.
It's
the
not
other
too
end.
late. It might happen one day. I had to buy all right. DAIZEN, another guy who's having the season of his life. He's well on course to having literally the best season of his life. I think his previous best for Celtic in goal scoring was 11 for the season. He's got 9 at the start of November, which is unbelievable, really, for a guy who is not, I wouldn't say criticised, but often questioned for his finishing ability. Yeah. The goals he's scoring have been brilliant, and he's been in a little bit of not so great form. Nothing drastic, but maybe just the last 2 or 3 weeks he's been a wee bit off the boil. He was settling into a habit of picking up the ball and making dangerous passes into the middle of the pitch. It led to a couple of goals in the last maybe month or so. And again, nothing drastic, but just a wee bit off the boil. And I thought he started that game quite tentatively as well. There was a weird moment quite early on where I think it was McGregor. McGregor put a diagonal ball right over the top to him, and it fell to him maybe just about 6 yards out. But I think he questioned himself, so it was the chance was there to just swing your leg at it, left foot volley all day long, but he seemed to question himself and pull out of it altogether. Now, it's an extremely hard technique to execute that with the ball coming over your shoulder, but he didn't try. He just sort of turned away from it and the ball went out for a goal kick, so I thought, I wonder if his confidence is maybe taking a knock from maybe being off it a couple of weeks. But there was a moment just after the half-hour mark where it was him that pounced on that slightly loose ball in the centre circle, I think it was, just drove straight through. It was that was setting up Kyogo's goal. Yeah. And from that moment on, he was just absolutely on fire. Maybe it just took that trigger, that the ball just rolled in front of him and thought, right, okay, turn on DAIZEN this time.
Was it the third goal? Was it his third goal when he stole the ball off the Aberdeen midfielder in the midfield and ran onto it? Was this the Kyogo goal?
That's Kyogo's goal. That was half an hour in after he'd maybe had a little bit of a shaky start, because there was another one where he'd gone through on the left and he didn't really look. He crossed it right behind Kyogo and it was just cleared. So I thought, he's not having a great game. But after that moment where he seized upon that ball that was loose in the midfield, just drove straight at Aberdeen and it led to Kyogo's goal. He was basically on it from the rest of the game.
The reason I bring that up was because I know we're all astounded by his pace at times, Mark Melly, but there seemed to be 8 or 9 yards between DAIZEN and the ball, and to my eye it just looked like the Aberdeen player just had to put his foot on it or move 1 yard, but before he could even do that, DAIZEN's away with it.
No such thing as a 50-50 with DAIZEN.
No, and you're like, what chance have you got? And as you say, he's steaming right through on goal, and you could almost see the whites of the Aberdeen players' eyes when this guy's bearing down on them. You're like, he's back.
Yeah, the Kyogo goal's a brilliant one to watch. From the second the ball is picked up in transition or won by Celtic to it's in the back of the net, it's so quickly, and it's the 3 players, Kuhn, Maeda and Kyogo, just the sheer pace of them getting in there. And Maeda's got this sort of thing where he's in your head before the game starts, because I've no doubt that Aberdeen players will be looking up, seeing a guy coming towards them and going, it's MAEDA, and absolutely
Yeah,
panic because
yeah.
he's so quick that you don't have a second. He nips in and he gets that ball away, and then he's off. And sometimes when we were in the behind the goal so we'd had directly looking at him running towards it, and he's running away from goal. He's touching it. Is he taking it too far? And he just has the awareness to stop, pass it to Kyogo, and the finish was absolutely brilliant. It was a great goal, that counter attack, and Aberdeen got done to them what Celtic got done to them in Dortmund. Just great players ripping them apart, and DAIZEN Maeda's getting himself. I think Brendan Rodgers spoke about him before the games, or might have been after the game, saying after he was away with Japan in the last international break, he wasn't feeling too good after it, and he didn't have a couple of good games. They gave him a rest during the week, and he seemed to be back at it, and he's getting himself into the position now where he's getting goals, but they're easy goals because of the position. He's doing all the hard work before that, so the balls, like, he can't really miss a lot of the chances because he's got himself into those positions. And we're seeing Celtic, when we've seen it under Ange, when one winger's got the ball or one forward's got the ball, the other two know where they have to be, and we're just seeing them pick up these balls and put them in the back of the net with ease. And the run for his second goal is absolutely brilliant. There's not a lot you can do with that, especially with that ball through by Kuhn.
It is
Finishes
brilliant.
great.
See, when you're thinking back, you think, was that the second goal? Was that the sixth goal? Was that? It's brilliant when you come away from games
I
confused.
sort of did it earlier. I just did it 2 minutes ago, tripping up over which goal was which.
But the good thing with Celtic in the front three, whether Ida comes in for Kyogo, is they've all got pace, and that can translate.
Another Brendan buzzword, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that can translate from Scotland into Europe. That is going to be difficult for teams to go up against. And if Celtic can play the way they're playing and evolve into a European team, we're hitting teams on the counter attack like they did with Aberdeen. It was absolutely ruthless. Like I say, no sendings off, no terrible back passes, no goalkeeping disasters, just Celtic ripping them apart, shredding them because of the sheer pace and skill of these guys. It was brilliant to watch, in Maeda and Kuhn on the other side. They were unplayable.
It's set up an absolutely delicious League Cup final because,
Yeah.
listen, it's something we've promised not to talk too much about, but I mean, I know you have to book painters and decorators, popular ones, quite far in advance, don't you? So if you're Rangers, you're probably phoning around making some inquiries here, looking to get some decorating work done.
Yeah.
Because there's no doubt about it, Stephen Melly, this is the biggest game of both Rangers' lifetimes. if you have the crown jewel of the world's most successful club, if that's your thing, and Celtic are coming to take it away, and it's going to come down to 190 minutes at Hampden, and if we win that, we take the only thing you've got left. There is no the Rangers can't possibly come away and say that doesn't matter, that game doesn't count. It's the biggest game they've ever played, the biggest Glasgow derby in their 2 lives.
I've noticed that they've started to walk back the official language. They've started to call themselves one of the world's most successful. Homer Simpson meme as he's disappearing back into the bush after calling themselves the most successful club in the world for about 20 years or whatever
They
it
were
was.
saying it until it's 6 months ago. And then they saw that we were coming down the road,
Yeah.
and now they've started to walk it back.
You're right though. It's a huge game to come around when it really, what's at stake is your entire identity. It's not just one trophy, it's your entire existence, the entire thing you've been selling the club on for the past however many years. It's been the one thing, it's the antidote to the insecurity you've felt since going bust, is this world's most successful club thing you've been throwing around
They've
for the
been
last several years.
self-identifying as the world's most successful football club.
Yeah, yes, they have. And so that's in the balance. And I mean, it will become an incredibly tedious back and forth, depending on who's won this trophy and that trophy forever now. But, you know, them's the breaks. You've talked this up.
The problem is, exactly. They started it.
Yeah.
Look, we had no part in this.
No.
But you started it. You lay down that gauntlet, and we're going to pick it up and fist you with it.
Do you think Real Madrid will be tuning into the battle for the world's most successful club in December?
I know.
Raging.
That's enough about Rangers. A couple of points to finish on in Celtic here, Melly. The Lennoxtown Mole, Brendan Rodgers.
Oh, yeah.
Brendan Rodgers addressed it. The team getting leaked every week. That to me is one of the most pointless, fruitless acts of espionage that I could ever think about, because there's almost no benefit to it apart from getting to be the guy who tells everyone the Celtic team. I just, for the most part, you can pretty much guess the Celtic team anyway, so there's not an awful lot to be garnered from it. But Brendan was right when he said, like, from a Celtic point of view, you're kind of harming the team, and it must be. it must be either someone within the squad. It could, I suppose the point I'm making is it could only really be one of 15 or so people who really know the team.
It's difficult to figure it out, isn't it? Because some player that's playing or not playing tells a pal, and then it goes from there. But it's just petty, isn't it? It's like one of those tweets. Oh, I'm just looking for those internet likes. I get to be the guy that puts out the Celtic team. Does it make much difference? Probably not. But it's just annoying, isn't it? Like I get sent the team, so I'm like, oh right, okay, that's fine. And it's
Who
all
sends you? Name and shame them.
Hans Moleman. So. It's just annoying from Brendan Rodgers' point of view because Celtic will be looking to keep things in-house, but it's a sort of trust thing, isn't it, as well? If you're in the team or you're not in the team, so I don't know, I'm not saying it's a player, but somebody out there's doing something. So it can be a bit detrimental to the team, but Celtic have been playing that well. It hasn't really done much difference, but still a bit silly.
We had it a lot during the league Griffiths era, didn't we? The rumour was that it was Griffiths.
Oh, can't blame him now, unless he's got a mole. But my favourite thing Brendan Rodgers said about the whole thing when he was talking about, you're not a Celtic supporter if you do this to the club. My favourite thing he said was, if it's someone at Celtic that's doing it. I was like, I hope it's somebody at Celtic doing it. Everybody's just standing around. There's a guy there with an Aberdeen tracksuit and a clipboard. We're all just trying to get to the bottom of this, Brendan. I don't know who it is that's doing this. So unless it's someone at Celtic, I'll be very concerned if it's not someone at Celtic. And
so who else could I don't know the ins and outs of it. We're not going to solve it here on 20 Minute Tims, but is it? Do you maybe have to submit the squad ahead of time to the SFA or something?
Well, usually they name the team a day beforehand, so players and coaches will know who's playing on the day before, so it could be somebody there. But it's Liam Scales, isn't it? Get him out.
No, by the way, that's a joke. Right, we don't think it's Liam Scales. We saw the team late last week against Dundee, and Palma and Yang were on it, and on the At The Match podcast, Melly, patreon.com/20 Minute Tims, you and I were talking about comically. It's one for the ages that before the game I was like, Palma's been working hard. It's going to be really good to see what Palma brings. Yang, that element of unpredictability. What possibly could we expect to see from Yang tonight? I was excited to see stuff for both of them. Garbage. But I say this with all due respect to Luis Palma, right?
None.
A scintilla. Right? If we didn't see him in a Celtic shirt again, that would be fine by me. Not in a mean way, not in an aggressive way. I just feel by this point now, we've seen the Luis Palma show, and I don't need a sequel.
No, we don't, and it was sort of last chance saloon, wasn't it? If you can't do it at home to Dundee, then when are you going to do it? And that was the chance. The lineup came out, and I was a bit sceptical of it because I think there's a lot of changes in there, but there's a lot of quality came out, and I'm not too sure about it as well. With Kuhn not being on the bench, it wasn't as if we had him to come on and save the day, but the performances from the two of them were terrible, and I think Palma is one of the worst attacking performances I've seen from a player.
Nothing went right for the guy, did it?
No.
Absolutely nothing goes right, but that's not to say that it's the problem with him is there's a lot of problems.
I was about to say.
The decision making is so poor, and you can see it when he's playing from where we were sitting. There was a point where Anthony Ralston plays this brilliant crossfield ball to him. He's running, watching it, and then it goes out behind him. Like, how did you lose the flight of that when you're looking straight at it? Then you can see him get the ball, and you can see cut inside and shoot. If I can see it, your head is down, defenders can see it, and he's just rattling things off shins and going nowhere. And everything Celtic done in that game broke down when it got to the two wide players. And Palma will get a lot of stick because he had more of the ball and didn't do a lot with it. Yang was barely even in the game, and that's just as bad for me. That is your time to go out there. He's done it against Dundee last season where he had his one good game for us, and I get stick last season for saying this guy's not a Celtic player, and we just see that it's just the basics of it. He's not willing to get involved in the game. Again, he's another guy that's head down and things just break down around him. And again, with the evolution of this team, we've seen it in the past with guys like Turnbull when it came to Ange's season. Celtic just moved beyond these guys. Kuhn, Maeda, Kyogo, even Forrester, just light years ahead of these guys, and probably outwides the one position in January. If Celtic are going into the market, you could say that's probably the first position, because Kuhn and Maeda, brilliant. Forrester, able deputy, but we're going to need to look a bit long term and maybe get somebody in there, because these two, there's no chance. And you're looking at them going, where do you go from here? Because Celtic have got big contracts on these guys. I don't really see a queue of teams looking for them.
To be fair to Celtic, Stephen, they've been actually quite good at moving players on in recent years. Like, they don't just hang about for too long, but the drop off between Kuhn and Yang is hilarious. If it wasn't so stark, and like, we don't need to rely on the guys. And Yang is I just have a soft spot for Yang. I think because there's things with Yang I see that I like, right? But he'll probably never make it at Celtic. But he's got a good first touch. He's a good dribbler at times, but he's like a guy that's really, really good at football down the local park. He doesn't, nothing to me, he's not been able to add those really essential elements to his game to become a Celtic winger. He's missing so much, and I just don't really see him getting that at Celtic. And people are often critical when you do this for Celtic players, give them time and all that, but it would be a dramatic, I know, like, for example, Kuhn. I saw Kuhn last season, I thought, he's no all there, he's no great, but there's a stark difference between what I was getting for Kuhn last season and what I'm getting from Yang now.
Yeah.
The ground is too much to make up.
Yeah, well, that's the problem, isn't it? And I know that we've just been talking about the extraordinary numbers that MAEDA and Kuhn are putting up this season, and we mentioned Kuhn last week about how he was putting up numbers that look set to eclipse guys like Jota.
Don't talk about it because people might hear it.
Yeah, Jota and Matt O'Reilly already. Oh, did you see that? Someone was on X, that Plettenberg or something like that. His name was Florian Plettenberg.
Yeah,
or whatever his name is, saying he's Kuhn's one to watch for the January window. And I'm like, jeez, I know. Okay. What did we have? A matter of weeks without getting our players touted all over the place. But anyway, like, we spoke about Kuhn and
X is great though.
Yeah, loads of good stuff on there. Yeah,
especially this week.
Oh, but we were just last week talking about the numbers that Kuhn's putting in are ridiculous, and now MAEDA's come back with another hat trick for this season. And while I would obviously have sympathy and say that might be an absolutely impossible standard to keep up, to even compete with as a Celtic backup winger, because as detailed, Jota wasn't doing that at the early stages of the best season of his life. That might be an impossible standard to expect guys like Yang and Palma to even attempt to keep up, but you need to be somewhere there or thereabouts. I mean, I know Yang set up the goal. I think he got an assist for Johnston's goal, and people said that after the game. I got an assist, but what we're dealing with here is 3 assists in 40 appearances
Plus,
or something like that.
I got an assist, but look at the goal. I mean, it was like a nothing cross that Johnston managed to stick his toe on the end of and flummox the keeper with it. It doesn't count.
Even if it was an absolutely...
Craig Levein.
Even if it was an absolutely flawless, breathtaking assist that took out 6 defenders and set up the goal, that's still only one in like however many appearances he's put in. I think that's now 37 appearances in total he's made for Celtic. I don't know a lot of those will be off the bench, but that's kind of the reality of
league campaign.
Yeah, that's the reality of a team like Celtic. You might not get this fabled run of games that people demand of players. It's not going to happen for you unless you really warrant it. So we're dealing with a body of work now from both Yang and Palma where you can look at it and you can make a judgment now. I know people are sensitive about writing players off, but there's been plenty of cause to do exactly that for lots of Celtic players in the past, and it's proven to be right. I think these two are maybe elevated beyond the usual dross that we get through the club, which seems to have been eliminated largely in the last season or so, which is great after the season or the previous summer window we had. But Brendan Rodgers has been fairly ruthless with some players. Guys he's just got rid of, even guys who contributed, Owen, Iwata and all that, they're all gone now because the team is evolving. There's evolution at play here. So I think he's tried very hard with Palma and Yang. I think he's given them ample opportunity, and it's just not going to happen for them because they are both of an age now where you would expect them to be competing with the players ahead of them. It's not just you're back up and you don't expect to play. Palma, I think, is 24, 25 years old. Yang, a wee bit younger at 22, but that's plenty old enough to be at least challenging for a place in the Celtic team. And they're not going to do it, quite frankly. Forrest will play ahead of either one of those.
Yeah, it's the numbers the other guys are putting up, but it's also the all-round play. And you're seeing them put up these numbers, getting sort of touted for moves, and Kuhn and MAEDA luckily signed a new deal recently, but just when you watch Palma, he's getting nothing that Brendan Rodgers spoke about. He's always talking about how to play in this Celtic team, you need to understand how they play, and he's just out there doing his own thing. The pacing, I think DAIZEN MAEDA would lap him in a 100-metre race, man. He's so slow, it's painful watching, man. And you just look, what does this guy have? He had a bit of threat last season where he got goals and he got the odd assist, but take that away, there's nothing there.
Yeah, it's. I think what got me excited about Palma was the sort of chat around him. Was he's worked really hard. He's dropped out the Honduras team to work on his Celtic career, and then we saw him in he came on in the Atalanta game, was it? And he was really, really working hard in the Atalanta game. You think, right, okay, translate that, go forth and show us what this newfound 6 weeks of hard work's got you, and you're like, all right, no, you're still Lewis Palma, and that's pretty much all the player you're ever going to be. And he's never really looked like a quality product. I don't really want to dwell on it too long, but I think it's only fair to say that I think ARNE ENGELS has been working his absolute stones off in the last couple of games, especially in the Aberdeen game. I was quite critical of him a couple of weeks ago, Melly, but he has been working so hard in these games. Like, maybe he's desperate to score. You can see that in him. He's desperate to score, but his delivery from corners has been brilliant. It's been absolutely devastating. And his work rate in these games, he was really battling in that Aberdeen game.
Yeah, it's because of the transfer fee, you're always going to look at that first. But Celtic's big transfer fees have usually been strikers, haven't they? Or like Julian, where you get to see, right, he stops goals, he scores goals, and that's it. We've never really had that midfielder since back in Lennon times where you're spending a lot of money on a midfielder. And ARNE ENGELS, I was watching the game at Hampden, and I was just like that. He's a brilliant player. It's just that the work rate off the ball is incredible. There was, even with, before I forget to mention it, there was, right when it was 0-0 at the start of the game, Kuhn's sprinting back, going up against Duke, nudges him off the ball with the shoulder and takes it away. And I was like, if he's doing that, it's because this team have to do that to stay in the team. And ARNE ENGELS was everywhere in that game. He's worked so hard off the ball that I think the on the ball stuff will come naturally to him. So when you marry the two of them up, we're going to have a great player. And he's just a pleasure to watch on the day. And I think the three in midfield had to work really hard on the ball, but also off the ball on Saturday. Aberdeen didn't get a sniff, and that's because the whole team played well. But that midfield three, I thought it was Rio Hatate's best game.
Glad you said that. I was waiting for that. Yeah,
he was brilliant. But ARNE ENGELS, when you see him in the flesh, the ground he can cover from where he gets the ball to where he can get to next is brilliant. His range of passing's coming, and I think he's just going to grow into the Celtic jersey. And it's difficult because he's come in, big price tag, coming in, you're settling in, he has a couple of good games, then you've got a big Champions League game, then you're back to domestic duties, international break, so forth and that. So I think once we come back after this international break coming up, we'll see how these guys get on when they're playing every couple of days, getting used to it, getting used to the formation, the way Celtic playing. Guys like Trusty, ENGELS, Ida, who have missed out on the pre-season, will just start to look like Celtic players if ARNE ENGELS isn't there already.
Genuinely superb for the sixth goal, I think it was, which was arguably the pick of the bunch. That was when he had that little move out on the right.
He loves a tackle.
Yeah,
as well.
and the ball eventually got to DAIZEN at the back post through a great move involving Bernardo as well. I mean, it's one of those games where you might not get round everyone and acknowledge how brilliant they were.
That's why we have at the match podcast.
Yeah, that's
it. Was him for the Kuhn one as well, wasn't it? Well, he slides in. And...
Yeah, so I mean, that wasn't the best finish of the day, but it was the best team move, I think, with Bernardo involved as well. So I wanted to acknowledge his part in that, and I'm glad you mentioned that about Hatate as well. Superb.
Leipzig.
Yeah.
It's coming up. Melly, just the way the fixtures fall, most people will probably be listening to this on the day of or even after the Leipzig game. So we will have, obviously, at the match podcast, not to bang on about it too much, but they are an important part of what we offer on Patreon. So we'll be talking about the game on that. We've already had Leipzig scouted. Melly, you were on a guest podcast.
Yes, I was on with RBL Talk, Justin. There is an English-speaking Red Racing Bull Sport Leipzig podcast out there. You can find it.
Nailed it.
Yep, he was out. So I was on that and also done the scout.
Never mind the name. They support an energy drink.
Yes.
Ridiculous.
It's an absolutely absurd concept.
Monster for me.
You're a monster. You're a goth, are you? Listen,
no danger.
No. Is that Dragon Soup?
No. Similar.
Jamie's Caribou.
Yeah. We're just listing. It was good. That's how you knew we're listing.
None of them have paid for anything.
No.
Yeah, other energy drinks are available. Okay, Stephen, Leipzig, we have discussed at length on this podcast before every Champions League game how really you can take nothing away from Scottish performance, really, and it really reflects on what you can expect from Celtic in the Champions League. I think there's a weird myth going about that Leipzig are somehow there for the taking. I think that's people.
We've been there, haven't we?
We've been there as well. Listen, Leipzig are a good side.
Yep.
And it's going to be a very, very difficult tie. But I think the Atalanta game, if it's done anything, it's given the players belief, yes, but it's also given the fans a bit of belief that, okay, maybe you can't translate so much what you do in domestically to Europe, but there's a lot we can take from the way Celtic performed and worked in that Atalanta game and went about their business in the Atalanta tie that we can get behind.
Aye, absolutely. It was a real, it generated a real pride for the supporters. Just, I know, and we acknowledged it at the time. I know it's just a nothing each draw, but it proved that Celtic could turn up, they could show a bit of heart and fight and just dig in and grind out a result. And that's maybe what it's going to take to get through a couple of these games.
They beat Napoli 3-0 at the weekend away from home.
Yeah, exactly. So look, it's quite difficult to look at these teams' domestic form and take anything from it as well, because Borussia Dortmund haven't been necessarily that great either. Leipzig have been excellent in the
Dortmund beat Leipzig at the weekend.
Dortmund beat Leipzig, and then Leipzig are way down the very bottom of the Champions League so far, haven't got a single point. So that's all over the place really in terms of having a...
I think it's worth, people might hear that and get encouraged, Mel, but it's worth noting who Leipzig have played in the Champions League so far, the way it works.
Atletico Madrid, Liverpool and Juventus.
There you go.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm not correcting you, but listeners might go, oh, they've actually got 0 points. Give me some of that.
So that's what I mean about it being quite hard to actually get a handle on where they are. My main concern with this game would be that they need to win. They need to come to Celtic Park and win. They can't go 4 straight defeats.
And they'll identify that as a place to pick up points for sure.
Yeah, I think that's only realistic to do that. If I'm being honest, zooming out from the fixture list as a whole, I probably would have looked at Bratislava, need to win that game. If we've got any chance of doing anything, we need to win that game, but we've got 3 toughies there.
Yes.
That is, realistically, we might go those 3 games with nothing whatsoever, and we maybe need to settle in for that and get used to it along the way. We've done better than that. I've got a point from those, but that doesn't mean the overall picture has changed. I still look at this game as something that might not go Celtic's way, but we've got opportunities elsewhere to pick up 8-9 points, in the so-called easier games.
So you saying anything from this game is for you and your pre-competition expectations? Anything from this game is a bonus?
That's maybe a good way to put it. I wouldn't be. I don't like to frame that in a defeatist way. I'm just being quite realistic about the situation, about how they are not necessarily an historic, a traditional romantic European team, but they're a very, very strong team. And one of those teams that I talked about with Atalanta, where I thought they're one of these very well organised and well coached teams that might just be quite well set up to give Celtic real problems. That said, we apply all the usual factors. It's Celtic at home in the Champions League, and it's going to be the atmosphere and all that on the night. Hopefully that can play a part. But Celtic are in good form now. I know I joked at the start of this about how going in as a 6-0 victory, that's exactly what we did with Borussia Dortmund. It's the most dangerous game. It's the most dangerous preparation we could hope for. Whereas we drew with Aberdeen and then drew with Atalanta. So I wouldn't be defeatist about it. I'm not saying, I would take a 2-0 defeat right now. I just think it's
cautious.
Yeah, I'm cautious, but I think Celtic can have every right to be confident about it, because that performance against Aberdeen, again, as much as we can't necessarily transplant that from domestic football straight into the Champions League against a very strong team, but all we can really do is go into a game like that full of confidence based on the previous result, and not even just the result, the previous performance against a previously very strong team in the division. Aberdeen I think that's the first game they've lost in 90 minutes since March, and the previous time would have been Celtic in penalties. So they were a strong team, and Celtic dispatched them easily and played some amazing football. So that's a good preparation for it. However, as we're experiencing in the Champions League now, it's a completely different challenge when we go up to play against these teams. So I'm cautious, but relatively confident.
I'm looking forward to it. I think it's one of these games, like Stephen said, where if Celtic had been beaten by Dortmund and Atalanta, you'd be like, we really need a point from this game, but we're sort of ahead of schedule, and if Celtic can go into this game and get a point or even 3, I think we'd put ourselves in a great position. Good thing is, we've got that Atalanta game where we can call upon, where we know this team can sit in, we know they can suffer and they can defend well. So I think it's about putting together the performance from the Atalanta game and the Bratislava game. Also a bit of the Aberdeen game. I think the going at this team in the counter-attack is going to be critical for Celtic. I think that's where we can get joy, and that's why I said about the pace of our front three, because I think that can hurt MD. And Leipzig, I think Atalanta are a team that is a team. It's the way they play, their style of play. Leipzig, I think they're like that, but it's more about individual players, and I think that's where Dortmund hurt Celtic. This one, it could be the same, but Celtic are set up quite well for it. They're going into it, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's got a powder keg written all over it.
A barn burner.
It's going to be a good game. And these strong ties, the atmosphere's always there. Celtic Park, under the lights, European night. We know what to expect as far as what the fans are going to bring. Last question, because I'm quite intrigued about this. Do you think we're going to go... Because the two main changes the way Celtic approach these games for me really comes down to which one of these two players start. Because I think whatever one of these two players start changes or indicates a whole different approach, right? Kyogo or Ida?
Thought you were going to go Palma there, but...
No. Yang or Kun? We're going to go, man.
I would go Kyogo from the start. I think the home factor is a big factor, and I think the pace as well. But I wouldn't be mad at Adamida playing, but I just think Kyogo, he's done it at Celtic Park before, and I think this is a time for him to shine.
And on that, Stephen, I was going to give the opportunity to Stephen in case anyone thinks I'm being rude.
No, I've just got nothing to add to that. I agreed with everything. I would just be wasting everyone's time like I am right now. But so proceed.
And on that, we shall end. Join us on Patreon to get our post-match thoughts, and you can support the podcast to get extra podcast videos in writing. See you next week.